Good morning and welcome to our first edition of Core Perspectives for the year. Our topic for today is how to treat clients differently to achieve great outcomes. Yes, we're actually saying you want to discriminate against clients, but not unfairly, in a way that's actually helpful to them. So I'm really excited about today's topic because we're going to get into very, very practical aspects of how to run your meetings differently, how to explain financial concepts differently according to your clients. And this is really the culmination of this behavioral thread that we've seen running through our core perspectives last year. So we began last year with looking at the trend towards passive and how increased competition has made it more and more difficult to pick the winning fund, which led into the second core perspectives of the year. If my role isn't to pick the winning fund as a financial planner, where can I really and truly add value to my clients? Then we went on a bit of a detour and covered sequence of return risk. But even here, we discussed a concept called bucketing and putting some of your money, your clients' money, retirees, in a low-risk bucket that helps them during emotional times when markets are dropping and dipping or having a financial crisis. And then we brought that all together with the fourth and final core perspectives. So as you can see, this behavioral thread ran throughout. But today is based on actual research, and Nedgroup Investments conducted the largest behavioral study in Africa of its kind. And from that research, we found 6, let's call them financial personality types. Now, these types are specific to South Africans, and we tested both clients and advisors. So as you're going through today and thinking about your clients and which personality type they are, also keep in mind what personality type you might be and how this interaction can play out in your meetings and various interactions. So today we have Sune de Villiers, who is going to be taking us through this topic. Welcome, Sune.
Thanks so much, Tracy, and thanks so much to all of you for dialing in today. As Tracy mentioned, the study was done very wide. We included both planners and end investors. It consisted of more than 3,000 participants, and it included several questions really focused on trying to figure out how people think and feel about money. Because if we can understand how people think and feel about money, we can adapt our behavior to help them to make better decisions and at the end of the day, achieve better long-term outcomes. Now, what we found when we work through the data and analyze the data is that there's various characteristics that differentiate clients. So we picked up numbers and rankings on various characteristics, but there were 6 that were the true unique differentiators across the personalities, and we were able to label 6. So we have sensitive, skittish, and stressed on the one hand, and secure, secluded, and settled on the other hand. But the most important and quite interesting and unique to South Africa characteristic is the one called composure. Because just understanding composure of your client, low versus high, in other words, how emotional they feel about money, you can already make a massive difference in how you speak to your low composure clients versus your high composure clients. Because what we also found is that within low composure, there's a high degree of overlap of how they best communicate with and how they make their decisions. And similarly, within the high composure group, there was a high degree of overlap of their preferences and best environment to make decisions in. So what I'm going to do today is take you through, firstly, the low composure group. So let's start at a high level and just focus on low versus high. I'm going to show you a few tricks that you can apply to when dealing with your low composure versus your high composure clients. And then at the end, we'll go into a little bit more detail of the 3 types of low composure and the 3 types of high composure. So firstly, when you're dealing with your low composure group, in other words, your group of clients that are nervous and anxious and scared when markets are falling, there's 3 key things you need to keep in mind. Firstly, you have to remain calm. Even if you're nervous and anxious and a little bit scared about the situation, you have to model a sense of calm. It's things like speaking slowly, breathing deeply, serving them water and robust tea rather than coffee and sugar. Like really create a calm and patient and safe environment for them in your office. The other important thing to keep in mind when you're dealing with your low composure clients is to keep things simple. Use pictures and infographics rather than overwhelming them with charts and figures and complicated tables. And not in a condescending way because they don't understand or because they're not investment savvy, but because of the emotional state they are most likely in when they are coming to you to discuss their investment portfolio. And then lastly is to avoid using new charts and new concepts, especially when markets are down or when the portfolios are underperforming. Keep sticking to familiar things that they know, and just avoid new concepts, charts, and complicated things. And the easiest way to get you to understand what a low composure client most likely feel like when they come into your office is to picture yourself running down the road, your normal neighborhood jog, and the next moment a lion jumps out at you from a bush. And I'm pretty sure that you can all imagine that all of a sudden, you're frozen, you can't think straight, you've got fear rushing through your body, and your mind, because it goes into a fight or flight mode, shuts down all unnecessary bodily functions. And that extreme fear overwhelming your body takes away your ability to think calmly, rationally, and logical. And this is often, as extreme as it sounds, what a low composure client can feel like, internally, physically, when they need to come talk to you about, markets falling or their portfolio underperforming. And it's not just when markets are going through a crisis that your low composure clients feel emotional about money. We found that it's more general than that. We found that some of them can even develop, let's call it a mental block, against coming to see you to discuss their investment portfolio. And again, it's easiest to think of examples for you to understand what they feel like. Some of us might have like a mental block or an irrational fear of going to the dentist or for your annual checkups. But for me, what comes to mind is during my driver's license many years ago, I had no reason to be nervous going to the Karoo every June holiday. I've been driving for many years. I had my lessons. I had all the how you need to look and do this and do that. And even though I did it perfectly from a driving perspective in the car park, I was failed because of losing too many points, doing the parallel parking and all those kind of things. And then immediately booked a new appointment. But going to that second appointment, I was so nervous. I couldn't think straight. And it was so illogical because I knew exactly what to do, but I reversed into the pole on the first try already. And then again, my third attempt, I was even more nervous. And I rolled the car driving back into the test center in Gordons Bay. And eventually my mom intervened with some robust tea and rescue remedy, and I got it right. But that's exactly what happens. It can be quite irrational, and not because of logical fear or an actual, panic that they need to have, but it's just the emotional state that a low composure client tends to be in when they come discuss their investment portfolio with you. And one group of sketches that I really enjoy when you work with low composure clients is Carl Richards from Behavior Gap. Some of you may have seen us use quite a few of these in our presentations. And it's just a nice way to avoid showing complex charts and numbers and jargon and all those sorts of things to still get the same message across. So for example, if you think about having the conversation of don't focus on the short term, let's think long term when it comes to your higher risk, higher growth investments that include equity, instead of showing them, rolling return charts and likelihood of success and volatility and all of those things, you can keep it as simple as saying, right, we're investing the money today. You only need it in 5 years' time, so let's forget about it. And when you look at it again in 5 years' time, most likely it's going to be over here, and all you need to worry about is that simple trajectory. On the other hand, if you look at it every day or every 5 days, this is what it's going to feel like, and it's not necessary. So just a simple way to to explain, long-term versus short-term or volatility or whatever that kind of concept is, using a chart like this is much simpler and more effective with your low composure group. And Tracy alluded to the bucket approach in one of the previous core perspectives, and I've actually put something together for you in a similar fashion when you're delivering your holistic financial plan or when you're trying to get a low composure client to think of all the various parts of their portfolio. You could consider using something like, drawing buckets. In this example, I've labeled them urgent, necessary, and nice to have to avoid things like, long-term insurance and short-term insurance or liabilities, those kinds of words. And the nice thing about something simple like that is if you establish this concept with your low composure group once and something goes wrong in one of the buckets. So let's say it's COVID-19, the retirement savings has just fallen by 20% in a short space of time because it's in a high equity portfolio. If a client then comes to you panicking and nervous and wanting to switch into cash, you can then simply pull up a graphic that they're already familiar with and rehash something that you've already discussed with them. It's a simple way to then show them, but remember, the part you're stressing about is in your necessary bucket. It's medium to long term. We don't need it today, so we have time. It will recover. And remind them that they have their, let's call it urgent bucket or low risk bucket or their safety pot to say, don't worry, this is still here as we discussed. This is the bucket that you're worrying about and you don't need to. The other thing to keep in mind when working with your low composure group is to consider splitting out the concepts across a few meetings. So maybe your approach is to have one big meeting once a year with your clients. With your low composure group, you might want to rather do something like, have 3 shorter meetings, 3 months apart, when you're trying to get a few things through. The other thing that you can do is as you move from your, urgent bucket to your necessary bucket discussion, try and use something that's familiar. So if you're including passive in your range, use the Nedgroup Investments core guarded, diversified, and accelerated fund across the range, because this allows you to only land a concept once and then just repeat it. So it could be something like using passive across, it could be sticking to one asset manager across, but try and work in ways to get that familiarity as you move across the buckets. And by following this type of approach, by the time you get to your nice to have bucket that's focusing on wealth creation and diversification, it could already be quite a simple conversation because you're keeping it consistent and familiar, you're dividing it into bite-sized chunks, and the last conversation could then be quite a simple one. Okay, now I want to shift to the high composure group, which from a physical emotion perspective is quite the opposite to the low composure group. So these are the guys that will come to you cool, calm, and collected. They'll be rational. They'll be able to think logical, because from a composure perspective, they're good at maintaining a consistent sense of emotion. So they're calm. The other thing that is very common across this group, which is why there's, again, 3 key things that you need to keep in mind when working with the whole group, is that they have a very low desire for guidance and that they also have a high confidence. So they can make their own decisions. And these 2 characteristics, combined with the fact that they're coming to you being able to think logically and rationally, can make them a more difficult client to advise. They're going to come to you prepared, having thought through a few things, and in like a logical, let's think this through kind of state. So for this group, you have to show, the facts, the figures. You have to show that you've thought about some things. They want to use you as a sounding board. They want to come to you for your niche information or access to specialists that can help you with niche information around, tax structuring or estate planning and those kind of things. And these are the guys that you can show, charts and scenarios and use some of the financial interactive tools that's available. You kind of have to spark their interest. You have to give them a reason to come to you from a financial advice perspective. And then just going back to keeping it simple for your low composure group, for these guys you can absolutely use actual market data charts. So for them, instead of having, your 5-year scribble versus your long-term 5-year line, you can show them, look at what the equity market has done. There's been 3 weeks where it fell more than 10%, but it also had 5 weeks where it bounced more than 20. Keep it interesting and spark their interest. Also for this group, when you do talk through the financial plan, they're going to want to see nuggets of information from you. They're going to want to see that you've thought through all the various options and things that they need to consider. So for them, you can absolutely use more of your, like textbook charts and tables and things. And you want to show them that you've thought about, short-term liabilities, your long-term liabilities, and wealth creation. They want to know things like how much offshore am I going to use in each of these buckets. They want to know that you've thought about using a feeder fund versus moving your money offshore for the international part of your portfolio. And they're also going to want to see options. You don't need to keep it simple as in this part is just going to protect your money and this bucket's going to grow. They're going to want to see that you've thought about specialist asset classes versus multi-asset class structures, and that that there's hedge funds available, or whatever it is that they're interested in. They're going to want to see that you've thought about more investment options and that you are ready. Okay, so now I do want to move on and give you a little bit of insight into the 3 types of low composure and the 3 types of high composure clients. And for that, you need to look out for 6 characteristics. So we've discussed the composure, high versus low. Then once you've divided them into those 2 groups, you also want to understand their comparison tendency. How much are they looking at what the markets are doing or what the peer groups are doing? How aware are they of under or outperformance? Their familiarity preference? How biased are they to a single asset manager or a single concept? Their desire for guidance. Do they want you to help them make the decision, or do they want to do it by themselves? Their confidence. Can they make their own decisions, or do they want you to sign the papers with them? And then lastly, financial comfort. And here it's very important to distinguish between the emotional side of financial comfort and then actual financial comfort. What you'll find with someone with low financial comfort is that they're not necessarily can't afford their lifestyle. Very often someone with low financial comfort is living within their means, but it's not about that. It's about how they feel about expenses. So your low financial comfort guy can afford his school fees and his petrol and all of those things, but every single time he needs to pay for something, he's going to be worried. So it's the emotional side around budgeting and how much money they have. And if you look at each of these characteristics, so we've now done the high versus low. What I've done here for you is I've charted using the axis as the 0 line. What of these characteristics is high above the line and low below the line for each of these personality types? And again, you don't have to understand every single one to be able to understand whether someone is sensitive or skittish. Look for the outliers. So a stressed client, for example, their daily worrying about money and their short-term focus is going to stand out. Their low confidence is going to stand out. Versus a sensitive client has a very, very high desire for guidance will be your key to understanding, okay, he's a sensitive client, how do I now deal with them? And then the other interesting thing is as you move from low composure to high composure, there's a few things that very blatantly goes from above the line to below the line. So for example, desire for guidance immediately goes from your low composure needing it to the high composure not needing it as much. Similarly on the financial comfort, you're going from a few clients being very low in their financial comfort to a more confident financial comfort group of planners. Okay, and at this point, I want to invite Tracy back on stage with me and ask her to give us some insights into some people that she's met over the last 15 years who she thinks is low composure and high composure, and then let's try and unpack them together and try and place who fits where. Thank you, Tracy. I'll wait for you to come on back.
Thanks, Sune. So the person who comes to mind is somebody called Mari. Mari is a mother of 3, And her husband is an entrepreneur. So his business has the usual ups and downs. It's something I can relate to because my husband is also an entrepreneur. And she was originally an oral hygienist, but then on the birth of their third child, she decided to stay home with the kids. So you can imagine her days are pretty full. And for those of you who know Sune has two twin boys who've, I think, just turned 4.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you can relate to that as well. So she's constantly worried about daily finances, I'm sure having 3 kids, not working. And as Sune said, it's more about how somebody feels about money than what's actually going on. So she's got this constant concern. And she's also quite overwhelmed from a mental capacity perspective between the lifts and the homework and the fetching and the carrying and everything that needs to be done. So she's nervous to go see a planner, and it's not even something that crosses her mind because she's so focused on the day-to-day. The longer term is sort of almost like something that's not even thought about. And she's also concerned that she might not be clever enough to explain and unpack the whole financial situation to a planner. So based on that description, now that we know a little bit more about Mari, what financial personality is she? How should you go about your meetings and your interactions? Like, what is the best way to approach her?
Sure. Thanks, Tracy. That's a very good description. And interestingly enough, I think it's who you describe now is one of the personality types that we found to be the most common across the more than 3,000 people surveyed. So before I give the answer away, let's go back to the screen and go through all the the differentiating characteristics. And if I think back to how you explain Mari and just her personality when it comes to the money, the first thing that stands out is definitely the financial comfort. So remember, it's not necessarily that she can't afford what she's doing or that they don't have enough, but it's a constant worry. As Tracy mentioned, I've got 2 kids of my own, and every week there's then you have to send money for the teacher's birthday, then it's the assistant teacher's birthday, then you got to pay the playboy, then you need aftercare. There's just constantly things that's going to, make you snowball if you're already someone that is quite worried. So she sounds to me very much like I sometimes feel when it comes to my school expenses. It's just worrying the whole time, like, oh, it's another thing I have to pay, another thing, can I afford it? So that heightened emotion and stress around the daily finances, for me, I would say someone with low financial comfort. So if you look at the differentiating characteristics, stress is, of course, stands out as the very low financial comfort. And then the other thing that you spoke about that stood out for me is that concept of being too nervous to go see the planner. It almost makes me think of someone that procrastinates it rather than doing it because they're too worried that there's this big decision that I have to make. I have to go see someone and get an investment, but I can't make a decision. I don't know what I'm talking about. And so that's the other thing for me that stands out, and that's what we label as confidence. So someone that's with low confidence to make a decision might often, procrastinate actually making the decision. So if I'm looking at the low composure characteristics, Mari stands out for me as someone that is stressed. Also, if you think about the desire for guidance, she doesn't sound like the person that is rushing to the financial planner wanting the guidance. You know what I mean? She doesn't not want it, but again, there's not that high need to go speak to someone to ask questions. So I would label Mari as stressed, and in the study we found that 26%, now the exact numbers escape me, of the people surveyed was in the stressed category. So within the low composure, stressed is most definitely your most common type of client that you're dealing with. And the things about a stressed client, or the key characteristics of a stressed client, is someone that is extremely short-term focused and also lacks financial comfort. Now you can imagine those two combined are really detrimental to actually putting investment in place, because not only are they very worried about the day-to-day finances, they're also only looking at the day-to-day finances. So this person's biggest challenge is going to be to get started, is to actually come and sit down with you, discuss the plan, and and get invested. So the most important thing that you can do for a stressed client, in addition to being calm, like I said, do not serve this client coffee and sugar. It's just going to make it worse. Like, create a super calm environment, and then take a long-term view of getting the plan in place. So you might already know that this client needs 3 or 4 or 5 investment decisions made to be able to get to a point where they need to be, but just take the long-term view of getting all 5 done and see this person regularly. Have one meeting with her and say, okay, today we're just talking about your urgent bucket, and get that done. Give it time to digest it, set up a new meeting, and then go through the next bucket, and then the next bucket. And the other trick that works really well with this client is using a familiar fund range. So try and avoid using passive here and active there, or this manager here or this manager there, or a single fund here and then a fund of funds there. It's already hard enough for her to come see you and sit down and talk about the investments. So keep the investment solutions familiar as much as you can. Implement the same investment solution across all the buckets. It'll just help her not get overwhelmed with new concepts every time, because this is your client that's going to struggle to stay invested as well. You know, your low composure clients are likely to want to switch or, deviate from the long-term plan if they're nervous. So you want to make it as calm and easy as possible for them.
Thanks. That was really, really helpful.
Okay, so now let's move on to a high composure client. Is there anyone that you can think about that's calm and confident and strikes you as high composure?
Yes, so I've got somebody in mind, Kumalo. In some ways he's similar. He's 44, he's got 3 kids, but in other ways very, very different. So Kumalo also has his own business, but he started his business more than 10 years ago. And he actually helps startups get off the ground and with all those things they need to do to expand and grow and become successful. He's now developed a well-diversified portfolio of all these businesses he's helped. He's got a really strong team he's built up. So over those 10 years, he's really, in quite a good space, a stable position where things run really well. His wife works for a small accounting firm, and so her time is quite flexible, which helps. As we said, they also have 3 kids. The difference is they have an amazing nanny who does a lot of the fetching and the carrying and helping with the homework. So really, as you can tell, their lives are quite a different space, even though there's a lot of similarities between the two. And when Kumalo was early on in his career, before he had a family, before he was married, he was actually really great and disciplined, and he went to the largest asset manager in South Africa at the time as a one-stop shop, and he set up a few things. So he set up a retirement annuity contribution, and it escalates with 5% every year. He set up an emergency savings fund, so he put a lump sum into a relatively low-risk investment, and he set up recurring contributions to a global equity fund. So you can see, really, this was some time ago. He hasn't revisited it. He hasn't re-looked at it. He's not concerned that he hasn't revisited and re-looked at it. So given Kumalo and the differences, what kind of personality is he, and how should we handle those interactions?
Sure, Tracy, let's go through it. So if I think of all the things you explained, definitely quite the opposite to our previous stress client, Mari. And the other thing that almost stands out is, while you were talking and I was thinking, I was like desperately looking for something that does stand out. But the fact that there wasn't one specific thing that was very high, like it doesn't sound like he has a high comparison tendency. It sounds like he's invested and he's left it. His financial comfort seems fine. His confidence seems fine. So the interesting thing with the settled client, which interestingly enough is also another big group, it's also about a quarter of the participants that we surveyed, is that nothing particular is going to stand out from an emotional perspective. This client isn't going to be, as you can see on the chart here, doesn't have a particularly high desire for guidance or, a specific confidence level, familiarity, preference. So the way that you're going to pick up that Kumalo is most likely settled is through the fact that his investment portfolio is almost poorly maintained. Because your settled client tends to almost not be interested in investments because he's bored by it. So he doesn't worry about it. It doesn't faze him. He knows that he needs to do it, and he knows he's done it. It's just not a high priority in his life. So the most important thing that you can do for this client is take the responsibility almost on you to make sure that he keeps coming to you, whether it's once a year or 18 months. You need to almost, you need to promote the consistency, because this client isn't going to, have a routine of coming to you regularly. And as you've described now, the problem with this client is going to be the fact that he's going to outgrow his financial portfolio. So already, if you listen to what Kumar has gone through, a lot of things are out of date. Most likely, as in case of emergency fund, is too small because his income's gone up, or his contribution to the retirement annuity isn't effective anymore from what he could be saving from a tax perspective because he hasn't revised it. But the important thing for this client, which is very opposite to what I've just explained about Mari, is he's going to come to you once, and it's almost like you only have one shot. This is a client that's going to come to you once. He wants to see all of his options, all of the things that needs to happen, and right there and then make 3, 4, 5 decisions, sign the papers, and be done with it. The motto for this client, or the one tagline that I can leave you with a settled client, is to make the admin easy. These are your clients that could be very easy to deal with because they're high composure, because their financial comfort and all of those things are fine. It's more just getting them to come to you and get it done. Their biggest pain point is going to be the admin. Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks, Sune. I love how practical that was, and with analogies like a line jumping out, and how real you really made those client types come to life for us. So we hope you can apply this in your practice and review how you do meetings and the way you interact with your different clients. And we'd love to hear your feedback. So please do let us know how applying these principles has changed the way you do business and how the clients have responded. We have a series of articles on this topic, so keep an eye out in your inbox for those articles, or ask your sales consultant. Once again, thank you for joining us today.